Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Taj, and these are my revamps for the LEGO Bionicle Generation 2 Skull Villains. All footage of the original sets shown come from TTV and Jangbricks respectively. Go check out their channels, link in the description below. So first up we have Skull Basher. Now, I'm personally not a very big fan of the original Skull Basher. I especially hate how far away his arms are from his body. I just think that looks pretty bad and makes the entire figure look unfinished. I know that's a complaint I throw around a lot, but I just hate the way that looks. So I wanted to try to integrate this kind of slashing function into the figure's design with mine. So I decided to take a couple notes from Quake Beast and use a couple of gearboxes on their sides to kind of retain the same slashing motion, even though it's not exact. I swear it works a lot better than the footage that I'm showing here, but I just have this giant ring light in my way, making it a little tougher to use. I'm pretty happy with the way this gearbox worked out. If I were to try something else, I think I would make it so I only need to turn one knob to get the function to work properly, but I think this is a decent compromise, and it doesn't hold off of the back anywhere close to as much as the original. Plus you can move the arms individually, which kind of helps with the slashing motions. Onto the figure itself. The hands are knockoff pieces in gunmetal, which I think are pretty cool. I like the way that looks. I think it's a pretty good use of those parts. I made the horns smaller and decided to knock one of them off to kind of convey the zombie look, because I wanted a lot of asymmetry with all of these figures. I really like the way this arm shape kind of turned out. As well as just like him missing skin and armor. I went and gave him hooves and add some more asymmetry to the legs and triple joints because he is supposed to be a minotaur. But yeah, I guess that's all I have to say about Skull Basher. Next up is Skull Slicer. The original Skull Slicer is very skinny and under-armored, with a whopping 3 pieces of armor in the entire set. And while some people would argue this makes him look decayed, I would argue this just makes him look unfinished. I also really don't like how only one of the arms swings different from the others. It just looks strange. So I decided to just come up with a design that would allow his left arms to swing in alignment and his right arms to swing in alignment. With the only real issue being that the gears I'm using add more friction than I would like. I also found his color scheme to be a little generic, so I decided to just tack on a bunch of spring green, and I think it does wonders to make the set actually look out and be distinct. The torso design is custom and allows for pretty much whatever waist articulation you would want, and I really like the way these gunmetal Star Wars pieces turned out as just kind of hip armor. They leave enough room for leg posability, but also kind of close in a large gap, making the legs look much skinnier than I wanted them to. I also really like the way that these dark tan spikes look on the figure, just kind of like a little splash of extra color. I decided to add the legs back onto the skull spider and make that wrap around his head. I wanted to keep the arms asymmetric, and I'm pretty happy with the way they turned out. They're attached at kind of an awkward, using kind of an awkward method, but I think they get the job done just fine. But yeah, I guess that's it for Skull Slicer. Next up, Skull Warrior. I think Skull Warrior is the only one of the smaller sets that aren't just absolute failures and don't completely suck. Not because this set is good or anything, but because it's basically just another Toa and isn't built around some new dumb gimmick. He also probably does the best job of looking decayed because he's got a bunch of asymmetry that actually fully works with the figure, as opposed to, say, Skull Slicer, who just looks unfinished. I didn't really care about keeping the bow or spear, so I just gave him a sword. I'm pretty happy with the way that looks. It's a fairly commonly used design, but I think it works with the figure. Then I gave him a shield, because I have one of those parts lying around. Something I do really like are these spears at him, kind of like he's been shot by a bunch of arrows. Even got one in his head, keeping his eye stalk in place. I also used a couple of these Ice Zombie Chima armor pieces that I think just kind of help give the character more, well, character. I'm also really happy with the way these boots turned out, because they look kind of thick and heavy, and I kind of base these off of, like, Skeletal Warrior boots. Kind of like these here. The hip is on a ball joint, so that can pose absolutely no problem as well. But yeah, I guess that's it for Skull Warrior. Next up, Skull Scorpio. The original Skull Scorpio is a flawless masterpiece with amazing posability, a absolutely flawless tail design that totally looks good and isn't gappy and full of random Technic pieces. And the set overall definitely looks really good and totally finished, and didn't make it to the #1 spot of the worst non-Hero Factory CCBS sets. Shameless promo aside, my main inspiration for this figure was Scorpion King, a very terrible movie starring The Rock. Not only did I think this design would be a good basis for a Scorpion-themed mock, but I also already have a giant Scorpion mock, so I felt like it would just be redundant to do it again, but this time slightly decayed. I swapped out the original's grabby tail for an actual striking Scorpion tail. And this function kind of works flawlessly, except this stupid Generation 2 gimmick where you hit the back of the head and the mask flies off forced me to redesign this thing so many times. So thank you, LEGO. That is definitely a fantastic design. I can see why Generation 2 was such an amazing theme. I'm pretty satisfied with the way the arms turned out. I think they look sufficiently bulky, like they could do some serious damage if you just, like, grabbed onto you. Would pinch really hard. I'm also pretty happy with the way the legs turned out. I was a little concerned that they would end up being too bulky and not look sufficiently decayed, but I think they look pretty good and they stand pretty well. Yeah, I guess that's it for Skull Scorpio. And finally, Skull Grinder. Skull Grinder is one of G2's best sets, very easily top 5. Which, I realize watching this video is a very passive-aggressive compliment, but I do think this is a pretty good figure. The only real problem this set has is that the gearbox doesn't have enough friction to allow him to actually pose, because the weapon is too heavy. So that pretty much became the first thing that I wanted to fix. And I think I did a pretty good job. It holds a pose just fine, and it can swing pretty solidly. I went with the ball joint design that Onua Master and 2016's Akimu went with. I really like the way that these legs turned out with this knockoff armor and the printed fangs armor. I think that just looks really cool. He has very minor hip articulation, being able to kind of sway it from side to side. Not forward and backwards so much, but I think this kind of gets the job done. I'm really happy with the way this axe turned out. It was slimmed down a bit from the original. I like the way this Fang's armor and this spear look. And I also like that I was able to use the skinny bone on his right arm. I swapped out that serrated blade for something that looks a little more blunt. I'm pretty happy with the way that looks. I think it looks pretty cool. I like the way these Star Wars pieces in silver look. I think they're exclusively knockoffs, but I think they look pretty good anyway. And I definitely wanted him to have more of a final boss look to him compared to the original. And that includes keeping his stature pretty high. So here he is next to probably my least changed of my Toa, Pohatu. He's a decent chunk taller, much bulkier as well. But yeah, I guess that's everything for Skull Grinder. So yeah, that's gonna do it for the Skull Villains. If you enjoyed, make sure you leave a like, comment down below. If you haven't already, subscribe, because I got more stuff to show off and more projects on the works. But until then, I guess I'll see you in the next one. Take care, everyone.